script, you can see our Gauteng director and lean expert, Maurice Kuhn, on the screen there. And just very briefly, as you'll have seen, I mean, Mo is really TLC's most knowledgeable and renowned expert in the space of Lean and Six Sigma. I'm sure he'll try not to blush, but it's true. And we rely on Mo extensively to work with our major clients and to support with bigger projects, and also to coach and teach on projects, run the courses, even develop and advance our courses. And so Mo really has some fantastic experience, insights, knowledge, and wisdom to share. And we're really looking forward to hearing today as he talks a little bit about Lean, some of the origins, some of the philosophies, and so on, that help to paint a good picture or insight around the role of Lean and the value it can add in our organizations today and into the future. So I'm not going to say anything more, and I think I'm just going to hand over to Mo. Thank you, Mo, for coming to share with everybody today.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, I always get worried when I hear the word expert, because the more I learn, the more I realize how much I need to learn. So I suppose that's life and continuous improvement, right? But thank you for the intro.
I don't read very often.
Thanks for the intro. Folks, it's always difficult when we have a half an hour or an hour slot, because the subject we're dealing with is really such a broad subject. And the question is, especially with the topic that we're covering today, how much do we say? It's more about what do I leave out rather than what do I include. So I hope it's going to be of value to you. The idea is not to overwhelm you with too much information, but we do want to give you something worthwhile, and we really appreciate your making yourself available, like you have pretty much after work. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover really some of the history of Lean. Where did this come from? Because very often we hear the concepts, and sometimes people like to challenge concepts as if they've fallen out of the sky somewhere, as if somebody just got a brainwave overnight and came up with this new methodology, and it's a new thing, and we don't always appreciate what has really gone into this and the success stories that have been. So I'm going to focus very much on the origins of Lean. Then I'm going to talk about some of the key concepts of what these Lean concepts are. And then we're going to have a look at what it needs as far as the management of Lean and the leadership of Lean in those organizations to really make this work. And hopefully by the end of the session, that will be a good takeaway for us, is the fact that it's not so much a tool and a method and a set of tools, but all of that will not work unless we're on board as organizations and unless as managers we understand our role. So I'm going to really go through that process, and then towards the end we'll allow you afterwards, I think, to ask some questions. It might be good. I like the engagement, but it might be good to maybe hold back on the questions just so that we make sure that we get through all of the material, and then you're welcome to take me back to the slides and ask certain questions afterwards. So just a brief history, and some of you might know this history a little bit as well. Toyota's founder was a guy by the name of Sakichi Toyoda. He was a Japanese inventor. He was an industrialist, and he established what was known as Toyota Loom Works in 1926. He was the founder of Toyota Industries Corporation later on, and among all of his inventions, and he had several, the automatic power loom with an automatic stop the moment something goes wrong with the weaving. He invented that. Up to that point, the automatic loom would just go. So if there was a problem in it, they would see it in the fabric afterwards. So this principle became known as Jidoka in the Toyota production system. We'll talk about it a little bit more later on. Jidoka is also associated to the words autonomous or automation, or automation, if you put those two words together. If you've heard about the concept of 5 whys, asking 5 whys kind of each time you get to understand a root cause and you drill down for a deeper root cause, this concept came from Sakichi Toyoda. And then much later on, long after his death, the Japanese Patent Office actually recognized him as one of the top 10 Japanese inventors of all time. So just a little bit of background. His son, he had 2 sons. One of his sons, Kichiro Toyoda, was a successful businessman. He was actually very instrumental in bringing Toyota's focus away from this automatic loom manufacturing business and shifting it to the automobile manufacturing. He saw post-World War II that this idea could go a long way. He saw the Americans getting on board. He had to persuade his brother, who was in charge of the family business, to actually make the shift. And they considered it quite a risk to the family business at the time. As they say, hindsight is always an exact science. So looking back now, we know how successful Toyota Motor Company or Motor Corporation has been, and clearly that was the right decision that they took. By the way, Toyota, I think back in 2019, was seen, and I see even till today, they are among the top 10, probably the 10th wealthiest company in the world. They also happen to be the first company to make, I think, 10 million cars an annum, if I have my figures right over there. But very successful business, as we all know. And you can see over there with the logo how it's changed over the years. And then Taiichi Ohno, whose father was a friend of the founder, he joined Toyota Spinning. So you can see the automation loom, the automated loom business, after qualifying as an industrial engineer in 1932. And that was actually during the time that Japan was going through a Great Depression, and Toyota as an organization faced many times when they were almost bankrupt, and they were selling very few vehicles. So this was a really this was in pursuit of excellence and survival that a lot of what we see today and see as a success story, they went through a lot of pain to actually get to that point. He moved then over to the Toyota Motor Company in 1943. He was a shop floor supervisor, and he worked his way up through the ranks to become an executive. The principles of manufacturing started then influencing other areas as well. And today we see the principles of the just-in-time system, or the Toyota production system, which we know as Lean today. We see that across all businesses and all types of processes. And Taiichi Ohno was instrumental in developing the 7 wastes that organizations faced. We trained them ourselves. There's an 8th waste that was, that was added. And they refer to that waste as muda. Muda, of course, the Japanese word for, briefly translated, total uselessness. They're taught to absolutely hate waste and to look for every opportunity to identify and eliminate it. He's also known as the father, really, of the Toyota production system, as we see it today. A small picture over there in the corner, not expecting you to be able to read it. We'll find a better picture, a couple of slides down. Interesting thing about Taiichi Ohno, one of the statements that he made was, he said, "This is the manufacturing system developed by Toyota. It pursues optimal streamlining throughout the entire system, through the thorough elimination of muda, or waste. And it aims to build quality at that point in the manufacturing process, while recognizing the principle of reducing costs." And why I said recognizing the principle of cost reduction is because it wasn't cost reduction as we do it in Western organizations very often. This was cost reduction through waste elimination, not by devaluing the end product to the client. It also includes all accompanying technology necessary to accomplish those particular aims. So it was really all for automation, making use of the right systems that would get things to flow faster. So I came across this and I thought I'm going to actually include it because these were 10 precepts that for him to think and act to win. And this was kind of his mantras. So he said when he was speaking to people internally, you're a cost. First reduce waste. Understand that as an employee, it's costing the company money, and we need to make the best use of your time. Secondly, he said, first say, I can do it. Don't start with, it can't be done. And then you try. Before looking for any other reason why it can't be done, first pursue the fact that it can be done. The third one, very important, the workplace is a teacher. You can find answers only in the workplace. We're really good at looking at spreadsheets, getting second-hand information in our organizations and making real key decisions based on that information. So they really drove going to the place of work and understanding what is really going on there to find the optimal solution. The fourth one, do everything or anything immediately. So don't delay. If you want to get something right now, you've got to start doing it right now. It's the only way to win. Number 5, once you start something, persevere with it. Don't give up until you've completed it. Number 6, explain difficult things in a very easy to understand manner. Repeat things that are easy to understand. Why? Because then we're enforcing that with people. So how that translates into the way that they train staff, very much around the simplest way to get understanding there, and then reinforcing it so that everybody understands what's expected from them in the shortest possible time, always in finding ways to enforce it. Then number 7, waste is hidden. It's not always obvious, right? So do not hide it. Find ways to make the waste that we know is happening in processes very visible. This was a key challenge when they were moved from manufacturing into service-related processes, because a lot of what we see in service-related processes are not as visible as when you're making physical goods and products. And so, but the principle is the same. How do we find ways to make that waste visible? I like number 8. Valueless motions are equal to shortening one's life. So find those things that are absolutely a waste of unnecessary motion and get rid of them, because you're spending unnecessary time and effort on things that are not creating value. Number 9, re-improve what was improved for further improvement. Don't stop when you've achieved a goal. Always look at stretching the goal and making things, increasing the gap again so that we've got a new challenge to work towards. And number 10, wisdom is given equally to everybody. The point is whether one can exercise it. Okay. So I just like those because I think it's a nice setup for some of the other slides that we'll see as well. So just a little bit around the evolution of the Toyota production system back in the 1930s. You can see that picture over there. They were building vehicles. This is the Ford Motor Company. And then there was World War II. And 10 years later, after the devastation of the Japanese economy, once again, Taiichi Ohno and the executives made a trip again to see what was happening in the US and what was happening at Ford. They were a great student of Ford and Henry Ford and what he'd done. And the surprising thing that they found was that Ford was still producing in masses. They were still batch producing. There was still so much work in between processes. They were still producing cars at the end of the line and then looking for people to sell them to. And so there was all this capital that was locked in. And the problem is that with an economy that's so much smaller than the US, Japan couldn't operate like that. They had to find ways to take the principles, but to produce only what they could sell and only what the next process could handle. So just a little 3 concepts that really intrigued them and that influenced Lean as we see it today. The first one on the left-hand side, you can see the motor cars, and then you see an example of supermarkets, and then you see an example of Indy car racing. So let's quickly have a look at how those influence Lean. Well, the concept of flow was the first one. It was work is suddenly flowing to people instead of people going to the work. Before this, people would go to where the car was being built, and teams would then continue building this car. And this was a novel concept because people would be at the station where they would be working, but now the work would suddenly be flowing to them. A great concept. And how could we apply this to our processes was the thinking. The second one was a concept of which became known as just-in-time or pull. So where the cashier, as soon as products would go through the register, there would be a system that would be triggered so that in the back, they were triggered to actually bring product to the front, because they realized then that the product that was on the shelves were running low. So that was the whole concept of replenish it so that we don't run out of stock, because if we run out of stock, then customers can no longer purchase by putting this off the shelves. Again, a concept seen completely in a different place, but how do we pull that into our processes? And then the third one was the concept of how quickly, when a car reached the pit stop, they could actually do the necessary changed tires, cleaning the windscreen, making sure that all the parts were right, and refueling and getting the car out of the pit stop as quickly as possible. The concept again pulled into our processes. How do we reduce the time that it takes us to change things over from one machine setting to another machine setting, and thus getting the part flowing quicker? And one of the things Henry Ford liked to say was, you can have any color Model T you want to, as long as it's black. Why? Because it was a very, very lengthy process to change the nozzles and the paints to make a new color vehicle. But when customer demand started changing and saying, well, now we've got choice, they had to start thinking about how to do that and not delay production. So I'm jumping right into this slide because the Toyota production system, as we know, was actually developed over many, many years. This is 60 years at least in the making, and it continues to evolve. But they like to represent the Toyota production system as a house, and there's a real sequence in this house, and I'm just going to simplify that sequence for us very quickly. The first one is the base, and we all know that a house is only as strong really as its foundation. So the higher up you need to be going in this house, and the more load you're going to be putting onto it, the more your foundations need to be steady and stable and able to carry the walls and the roof. And so the basis of all healthy processes is that we need them stable. And there are a bunch of tools that help us with getting stability in our processes, making sure that they're clear, easy to understand, that everybody knows what to do, that they are workable, that everybody's following those processes, and making sure that we have the right metrics in place, that we're looking at the right things, that things are visually easy for people to follow. 5S, if you've heard about those concepts, making sure everything's in its place for everything. So those are all got to do with operational stability. Then once we've got that right, the second part we move to is the first wall, and that's on the right-hand side. That's our quality wall, or what they would call Jidoka. We spoke about that just now as autonomous automation. Now, there are a bunch of tools that help us to understand and get quality into our process. Because if we don't start with quality and we're just moving wasteful things through our process, and we then go at speeding things up, we end up flowing rubbish faster. That's all we end up doing. So the quickest way to increase speed is firstly to actually increase quality and get rid of the stuff that's not flowing properly. And again, a bunch of tools from our Lean toolkit or our Toyota production system toolkit that help us to get quality right at the source. The third one then is speed. And that's once we got quality right, is how do we actually ensure that customers are getting product faster? That as we're pushing them through in the front, that we don't end up having customers wait unnecessarily longer than what they're supposed to be waiting. And so there's a bunch of tools there that help us to firstly understand the demand. What are the customers expecting from our process? And then looking at how we are actually able to meet that demand, and looking at different tools to help us to close those particular gaps. All of this holds up the roof, and the roof is then world-class production. You know, it's getting lowest cost, highest quality, shortest time delivery to our customers. But really, all of this is not doable if we don't have proper leadership, management in place, and that's where lean leadership comes in. So I'm just going to briefly take you through a couple of slides that don't so much talk about stability, a little bit about the concepts of quality, and then we're going to look a little bit at the concepts of speed, and then we're going to look at lean leadership specifically. So there you can just see the Japanese words for Jidoka, as it's become to known, but that symbol in the middle, that Do symbol, is the symbol for human. And so without that particular symbol, it's just you know, automation. But the fact that there's a human element in it is what causes it to be autonomous automation. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. This came from the loom that we spoke about earlier on, where the founder, Sakichi Toyoda, invented that first auto-activated loom, the one with the stopping system in it when a mistake actually occurred. Again, more about that a bit later. And we said that the goal is to build quality into our process. Now, that's very different from inspecting quality in. So the first thing when we talk to organizations and we say to them, you know, inspection is actually a non-value adding activity, we always get lots of resistance for that. But there are countless examples of how inspection actually doesn't always pick up mistakes. You'll know in your own organization, you maybe have a quality checker right at the end of a process, and yet quality still, or poor quality still slips through. So this is where the concept is, how do we rather make it easier to get something right the first time and build that quality into our process than trying to inspect it in when it is too late. And Ford had huge problems with this. I think even Toyota, where they build a car and right at the end they would inspect it and find that something was wrong, but that process step happened very, very early on. And because of the way the vehicle was built, it's almost cheaper to scrap the entire vehicle than to try and dismantle it and put it together again. So we don't want that in our processes. So instead of having the top scenario, where you kind of inspect and then rework or scrap, it's looking at every process step and seeing how do we build quality in and check quality as we're moving along. So this Jidoka sequence that we saw it starts with an abnormality. And the first thing you want to do is stop the process by detecting this abnormality. And there are many different tools we can use for that, right? So there's something called error proofing or poka-yoke. It comes from the word poka-yokeru, which talks about avoiding inadvertent mistakes that people would make due to whatever reasons, complexity of task or people getting tired and so on. Having a stop in a fixed position so that it can't go beyond something. So building something in so that you can't get it wrong. Monitoring the performance very, very carefully at that point in the process, and then proactive detection, so we can detect it as early as possible. So that's where it starts. The point was then, okay, so when it stopped, we got to do something, right? So call and wait. So there's an alert. And that alert looked very funny in the Toyota production system because, you know, those of you who may be older and have as children been on the buses where the bell was a cord that you would pull and then it would ring a bell, you know, and the bus driver would know when to stop at the next stop. This is exactly what they had in Toyota. They had a rope going right round and people would then pull a cord and this would be an indication something's gone wrong. So the idea there is wait. You need a system to alert that quickly so that you can go to the place where the problem occurs. And then the third part of it is where the human normally comes in. It's a judgment. What is going wrong here? How do we solve the problem? And sometimes that solving the problem means taking something out of the process, solving it, learning from it, so that we can see what needs to be done so that the next thing that's coming through the process doesn't go through the same problem. It's that building that quality back into the process by learning what has gone wrong. But we might fix it then off the line and then put it back in the line so we can, so that we can move it on. But this is the three-step process of actually developing quality into our process. There's an example of a brick manufacturing plant. Let's say we've got a frame size right at the start, and that serves as a kind of a mold. We're not just making up the sizes as we move along. And then we might have a second point. Well, let's just make sure that the weight is right. So a way to do that is maybe to have a scale, and it's also how we use it then, right? Standard checks. And then the process stops if we see, hold on, this thing is underweight, which talks then to the strength of the brick. But if the weight is fine, it might just then move on to the next step. And we all know that, if it's an air brick, for instance, are those holes in the right place? Because if they're not in the right place, then obviously, when we're using this in the building construction, this is going to be a major weakness for us. So maybe there's a tool that does a air pressure test. And this is an example of a very simple three-step process where instead of inspecting right at the end, you've got something in place at every step to check and stop and detect and stop it if need be. So that takes care of just, I think, in broad terms, if we're talking about building in quality, it's those lean tools that help us to actually consider where quality goes wrong, stop it as quickly as possible by detecting it soon, and then how do we actually deal with it? All of that is part of ensuring quality is in place. So let's look at step number 3, which I went through briefly just now, which is now to do with just in time, or the speed part of it. Just in time is very often also used synonymous with lean, and it's used synonymously with the Toyota production system itself. And just in time is actually just a mature lean system, because we've already sorted out quality. Now we're getting speed and leveling and so on, right? So the idea here is to improve flow, so things aren't waiting in the process along the way, because things that are waiting are adding to capital that's unnecessarily locked up, and a customer's waiting for the product, but not because we're taking, we're doing value-adding work on it. They're waiting for the product because we're not working on it at that point in time. And that's an unnecessary waiting time to pass on to the customer. So this is about getting our supply and our customer processes properly aligned, where we're producing only what the customer orders. We replenish only what was withdrawn, just as and when it's needed. And our customers get exactly what they need when they need it. In this particular example over here, we can see that by moving from a process of processing batches to single piece flow, we can actually drastically reduce the time it takes for something to work through our processes. So this example over here, you can see batches between 3 different individuals. And we see that because they're processing a whole batch in the first 100 minutes, they move the whole batch on in the next 100 minutes to the customer. And then by the third person who's then starting to process the batch, let's say at just over 200 minutes, your first completed one comes out. And then by the end of 300 minutes, the last one comes out. But all your customers were waiting here. As opposed to moving to a single piece flow, where we are actually producing one at a time, moving it into the next to the next person, and pretty much after the first 3 minutes, your first customer can actually start getting their product, compared to after 201 minutes in the first example. So this is how just changing from batches to single piece flow actually drastically reduces the time for the customer in terms of their waiting. Another concept here is thinking about our business differently, where we have, let's say, a process, we've got teams of people looking, all working on product A for different products or processes. And then you've got process B, and here's a team of people working on them, and process C, there's a team of people working on them. The thinking here is find the products that follow similar processes. And in the lean world, we call those value streams. So they're tools to help you to disseminate all of that into logical value streams. And then the way you set them up is rather that everybody working on a similar value stream actually works together. So then you start to get continuous flow. And imagine overlaying that process with the one that I previously showed you. Now you're getting, real speed through your system. This is just another view over here where we're seeing that if we move to one piece at a time, we also need to make sure that we are configuring the way that we are getting materials and the way that we are replenishing those materials so that it works in the same system. So that if we think about kind of just producing things in batches between process steps, we might say, well, no, don't just produce them in batches, because now I'm making too much work for the next process step and they can't handle it. How do I put something in between that actually regulates the number, and this can be by co-locating machines. You can actually install some kind of device or system or metric that actually keeps a certain standard in place, and it doesn't go below that standard and it doesn't go above that particular standard. This sounds very, very high tech, but very often these things that we're speaking about is not high tech solutions. They're very visible, very simple solutions that actually work very well. In the second scenario over here, this might actually mean, changing the way we work and where people are located to make the workflow faster, to create that efficiency. And then when it talks about getting parts or materials, if that's the kind of production processes we're talking about, it's about getting the parts closer to where the work is happening without needing to go far distances to draw materials, and then also drawing the right amount of stock that's needed for a meaningful period, let's say a shift, and only that amount, and replenishing it as we need it. It's also about having the right tools to do the jobs we need to do without wasting time looking for the tools. Again, many different tools we can use to actually bring about that particular situation. And then it's about active synchronization of our flow. If everybody's working at high speed, then we are creating work between processes, and that's what's causing the buildup and the working capital and the pressure on the system. So rather, we want to work on a pool system where there's less stock in the process. There's higher transparency. You can more easily see the waste when it occurs. People aren't falling over one another, and we can control the lead time a lot better, as I showed you in the previous example. So pool is linked to customer demand. In other words, you don't just decide at what speed we do this. It's based on the rate at which we must produce this at the pool of the customer or the demand on your processes. And again, many lean tools that help us to understand that. What the customer demand is. There's something called takt time, which is understanding the rate of the demand. If I need to give a customer a certain output by the end of a shift, at what rate do I need to work? So I know early on already whether I'm ahead or whether I'm behind or whether I'm on target to actually meet that rate. We don't wait for a period afterwards and then do a check at the end of the day. So in a pull system, all processes receive the order to produce from the immediate customer. They all produce according to what the customer wants when they want it. Okay. If this condition is not respected, the system is a push system. Because then we're just working as fast as possible. So if you want to know if your process is push or pull, is there a pull from the next process step for you to hand over the work, or is everybody working at the rate that they work at and they just hand it on to the next person? If you see inventory build up or work in progress build up, then we've got a push system going. So I'm not going to focus too much on this. This is something you can go and have a look at afterwards as well. But there are tools called Kanbans or Kanbans. That's the word that you see over here. And really what we're saying is, if we are smart about understanding what the customers are expecting from our process, at what rate they're expecting it, at what volumes they're expecting it, if I've got different products going through the same process, understanding what percentages of which products are needing to be produced, then we apply lean thinking a lot more to actually issue instructions from downstream in the process that actually help them upstream to produce the right quantities in the right sequences. And so some of the more advanced lean systems have these instructions that are going through, but they're properly planned, they're properly built in. We don't just leave it to chance and everybody works at the rate that they can to actually produce. So this is where we have production instructions, and then we can have production withdrawals. Again, this might be more lean towards manufacturing, but it's talking about some of these basic concepts. And if we really want to get to this overall system of just in time, then there are three things we have to do. We have to have discipline to actually follow instructions. If we're not getting it right there, then that's the place to start. It's getting our work instructions properly in place and making sure that we understand why people are not following instructions. Are the instructions unclear? Are they not workable? Are there gaps? Have we not trained people properly? Don't they understand what they're supposed to do? Don't they have the right tools perhaps to do that? So that's really critical that we get work standards and that people are following those standards. And then the standard might not be great, but at least everybody's following it. So it stands out that while we're following the standards, we're not getting what we need to do. And then we're right for the next improvement. The second thing is we need stability. So my equipment must be properly serviced. It must be available to do the work. It needs to be producing the right quality. So the specifications on those machines need to be right. If we've got problem with suboptimal or breaking machinery, then we're not going to be able to work just in time, because it requires everything to be working according to a schedule in order for just in time to work. Some people I've heard of in the past say, wow, I've tried just in time, it didn't work for me. And then I start asking them some questions about what they've done. And then they say, well, my just in time system means that I need to order on a daily basis and my supplier needs to actually provide on a daily basis. I used to carry 2 weeks stock. I've now gone down to 1 day stock, but it didn't work. And I say, well, is your supplier able to actually deliver every day? And they say, no, that's what, now people are waiting around waiting for work. So, well, clearly that's a problem, because it'll only work if your supplier can actually then supply on a daily basis. Otherwise, your just-in-time system is going to fail you. So, so all of these things need to work just in time and need to be coherent, across the process. Otherwise, the system won't work. And that speaks to the third part, right, which is leveling the production. It's so that everybody is able to do work all the time without this large inventory between process steps. So clearly then, if we're not able to provide that as a supplier up front, then it means people at the start of the process actually don't have work to do. So these are three key principles. And just talking about leveling again, what do we mean? Well, in this example over here, we've got two processes that's feeding, let's say, process 3. And here, because process A is pretty much got 2 people, they're producing a lot more. Process B is trying to produce, but it's not, it's not filtering through. And so if we were expecting lots of goods here at the end, you're not going to find that properly produced at the end of the line. In this particular example over here, we might say, hold on, let's slow down things over here and then make sure that we're integrating them into the following process. So it's all about understanding the flow and putting things in place so that products flow through in a way that is meaningful for my end customer. Very often, what people tell us in lean process environments, when we've moved to level production, they very often aren't working harder. Sometimes they're working slightly slower, but the quality is right and the customer's getting what they need at the end of the process. Whereas beforehand, they worked very hard, but we were still not meeting demand. And it's all because we're starting at the right place by properly understanding demand and aligning what we're doing to that demand. And by the way, that is good for all processes. It's not just manufacturing, right? This is good for all processes. So I think the part we haven't spoken about yet is we've spoken about the Toyota production system, but there's something called the Toyota way. And that's the 4P model. This is something that's got to do with their culture, because the tools and the method won't work outside of the culture. And we lean very, very strongly on the culture because this comes from an Eastern culture where inherently they have a lot of discipline within their societal culture coming out of the homes and the schooling system. And so in our environments in the Western world, we have to breed a lot of that culture because it's not necessarily naturally there. And so we got to consider this as we're on our lean journey and looking at why things are maybe working. I'm doing the tools, but we're not making it happen. And that's because it hasn't really become part of our culture and our social system yet. So the 4 Ps are, firstly, at the base, everything is done with long-term thinking. We don't take shortcuts in our decisions, even at the top of the organization, at the steering leadership level. They don't make decisions that benefit them in the short term, only to hurt them in the long term. They will take shorter term knocks if it's not good for the longevity of the organization, because they want the organization to grow and develop, and they want their children and their children's children to also have a part in that organization and that success story. The second thing they do is they're always looking at where they can improve process. So finding and eliminating all sources of waste. And in lean process journeys, you fix something on one place and then find that in another place, it's now creating a problem. Imagine a river that's flowing and you had a blockage upstream. Now you remove the blockage, and so the water flows through better, but only to dam up at another place in the process downstream. And now we've got a new problem. And until we remove that blockage downstream, our customer is still not getting the benefit. So we might be sub-optimizing, but we need to be mindful of where the next problem is occurring so that we can tackle that and actually get that full benefit of flow all the way through to the customer. It's not that the second problem was always a problem. It's been created because things are now suddenly flowing better upstream, and it's never done that in the past. So very much looking always at improving process. The third one is people and partners. And here they really look at how they can grow and develop their own people. They really invest in them. Toyota is actually one of the few companies in the world that when they go through a recession, almost never do they actually lay people off. They have enough money to keep things going. And that's the time they spend on fixing machines, fixing lines, retraining staff, upskilling them for new products and services. And then by the time they've worked through that recession, they've got a powerful workforce. The other organizations have laid people off, and now they're going to go through a whole process of actually getting new people employed training them up. You can imagine the variability in their product when that happens. And partners as well, they rather work with their partners to deliver to the end customers. So they don't treat them at arm's length. They actually work with them. And then problem solving is the last one. It's that whole continuous improvement cycle all the time in everything that they do. So that's called the 4P model. And this marries together with the Toyota production system. It's the technical stuff that we do, but then also the way that we conduct ourselves. And what does that look like as a leader and as an ops manager and as an employee, and allowing everybody to actually be developing and to be thinking people and to be making valuable contributions throughout the organization around how they can do things better. So the Toyota purpose is to generate value for customers, society, and the economy. They've never lost track of that purpose. And they make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you've heard about recalls before. But you know what we don't hear about? We often only hear about the Toyota recalls. We don't hear about other vehicle recalls. It's because of their philosophy. If something's not right, we will tell the customers before they tell us. And we will recall that so that we can fix it. Many of the other organizations that have these problems inherently will rather keep quiet about them because it's an additional cost to recall vehicles. So Toyota executives understand their place in the history of the company. The production system is about applying the principles of this Toyota way. So just lastly, I want to look at the job of lean leaders. It's to solve important problems that are important to our customers, to create processes that are adding value to our customers, to steadily improve them as we're moving along, to sustain those improvements, and to align and engage on everyone in the process. Folks, just bear with me a few more slides and then we'll be done. So what we do over here is just a quick comparison with the way we taught to manage things. So we talk about the Alfred Sloan School of Management versus the AG Toyota Gemba School of Management. Now, Gemba is another word for shop floor. It's if you think about the principle of Taiichi Ohno earlier on, go to the workplace. It's the place that teaches us. Now, AG Toyota was actually the cousin of the Toyota that formed or discovered the Toyota manufacturing or Toyota Motor Corporation. So he was also involved in this, and this became their management philosophy. So where in normal management philosophy we talk about delegating things vertically, right? In the lean leadership principle, they rather look at, instead of pulling things up, delegation of authority to higher levels, they're rather looking at how do we make it easier for people to make decisions where they're closer to the process by giving them the right support and properly empowering them and giving them the scope of what they can and can't do, instead of trying to keep control upwards. Because the moment you pull control upwards, things get stuck and now a customer needs to be escalating. And that's not good for customers. The second thing is that control is very often organizational chart focused within normal Western kind of organizations. But here the focus changes, and it's rather around managing through the process. So having process owners for end-to-end processes that manage all the work going through the process, rather than divisions or sections, and things get stuck in between. As far as measures are concerned, or metrics, a lot of the metrics we see in Western organizations is financial metrics. And very often they are lagging indicators. They're after the fact. Instead of having leading indicators that are telling us early on whether something is going to go wrong if we continue on this trend, because then we can rectify it quicker. As far as planning is concerned, a lot of the focus in the normal school of management is on making rules and checking that there's compliance, there's direction from the top. In Lean leadership principles, it's about putting processes in place where we learn quickly, and leaders are asking questions. We don't hide things. We rather seek to understand why they've happened. And then these feedback loops all the time, and they're quick, so that we fix things so that they don't reoccur again. As far as knowledge base is concerned, when we employ people here, we kind of say, you don't need to understand the process. If you've been through the university, you understand the principles of management. You've got people that understand their process. That's not a go as far as Toyota is concerned. Their leaders have deep process knowledge, and they often have worked across all the different parts of the business, so that they understand it deeply and properly. And then on the shop floor learning is what they use as the basis. So they're on the shop floor more often than what they are in their offices, but they have a deep understanding of their processes and their numbers. And then decision making. This happens very much, like I said earlier on, in the boardroom, based on data that's been analyzed and maybe filtered in a certain way. Here they say, no, let's go see for ourselves. Let's ask people why they're doing it in a particular way. If we're going to change things, at least show them the respect that we've properly understood what is going on and why they're doing it in that way. Problem solving, here it's conducted by staff. Maybe, consultants are coming in to solve the problems. Maybe it's through particular programs that we go through. In a lean environment, they say, you know what, these decisions are actually management's responsibility. They've got to work with cross-functional teams. They've got to empower them to be able to do that. They've got to be part of that. We don't give that authority away to somebody else to solve our problems. It's something that we must do. Standardization, conducted by staff. Over here, little shop floor involvement, little auditing that takes place. We tell and they do. Over here, it's conducted by lean leaders in the organization. The collaboration, it's done in collaboration with the people that is doing the work, and there's frequent auditing to actually see if people are following it, and if not, why, what is going wrong. And then here we manage our suppliers at arm's length, and we manage our partners, also our suppliers as partners in the Toyota world. Customer view, so very much short-term transactional. If the customer is worrying me, let me get them out of the door as quickly as possible. Here they're saying, no, my customer today treated well is a customer tomorrow. So let me understand that. Let me treat them, in the same regard. And those customers are likely to come back. And then as far as solutions are concerned, very much jumping to conclusions in the management world. We even tell people, don't come to me with a problem unless you already know how to solve it. And so the thinking is good. The thinking is own it. But what that breeds is we don't do proper root cause problem solving. And so we end up reacting and trying to deal with, kind of symptoms. And we don't get to deal with root causes. And here it's really trying to understand root causes properly and dealing with those. So this is just, it's very broad, like I said. I may be giving you really a lot of information to go and think about, but it's talking about the importance of the role of management and understanding the philosophies and how we need to align everything we're doing, including our policies, the way we work internally with our staff, with our people, with our partners, how we make decisions, all of that together with the tools of lean and understanding the sequence of the tools as we go through our lean journey is what will make you successful in the end. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. I hope you found it beneficial, and if there's still some time, I'm happy to handle some questions.
Thank you, Mo. I certainly think that you've managed to pack an enormous amount of valuable information into a short period of time. And I think if someone hadn't looked at Lean for a while, it's a brilliant refresher. And there's going to be something in there for those who haven't seen Lean before. There will be something in there that they can take away and think about back in their own workplaces. I haven't seen any questions come up in the chat, but maybe let's open up and see if anybody wants to raise a hand or just ask. I think we're a small enough group now that if there's anything anybody would like to ask or say or comment, go for it, jump in, and let's see if anybody would like to ask. I see Brian's made a comment there of straight to the point in terms of that, absolutely getting into the heart of lean and how it is so much more than just a couple of concepts and tools. I think a lot of people, their exposure to lean tends to be, oh yeah, we did 5S. Oh yeah, yes, I see. Yes, we do some visual management in our workplace or something to that effect. And I think what you've shared talks to the much bigger picture and perspective and the depth and breadth of the philosophy of lean. Brian, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to say something or ask a question? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Maurice, you've put it very nice and simple, but my only worry here, I don't know whether it's our industry or whether it's the organization's culture, where we try by all means to filter in and take these concepts into it. But on the implementation part, it becomes a challenge. So can you please maybe advise on how can we maneuver? Because now on the coaching side, on the giving of the material and the stuff, it's pretty easy because you tell a story. You just say, this is how you apply a tool. This is a tool. It can improve this and this and this and then. But now coming back and say, where are you applying those tools on day-to-day basis? Can I see what is happening as an evidence so that I can see the real meaning of the tools and how am I benefiting as the organization? So how well can we make sure that people understand it and they want to use it? They enjoy that thing. They've got appetite. Because in most cases, they've got a feeling that my background, I'm an industrial engineer as well. I understand the concept 100%. But for a person on the floor, on the front line, they take the concepts as something for manufacturing. So whenever you start talking about it, they say, but we are in the logistics company. But we are coming with these fancy tools, fish bones and stuff, and talking about Taiki or Ohno, Toyota. We are not in Toyota. So can't you make examples that are closer to home, that talks to us, so that when we implement, you talk about something that is more relevant to marine or more relevant to the trains, something like that. Thank you.
Brian, I think everybody that's online will probably acknowledge that they face the same challenge, and I think the one thing I didn't mean to try and make it look like is that it's simple, because it's everything but simple. If you go and read up about Toyota, you'll even find that they had their own challenges with this too, and I think at a core level, for me, one of the biggest challenges we have is how do we align what's important to the organization to what's important to the individual. And if you're not speaking to something that's important to the individual, then what you're busy doing is going to look like you are deciding to do something and doing it to them, and they're not owning it. And ownership has many different components to it, but very simplistically put, it's got to be something that is a big enough problem to start off with, that people are relating to, that if this problem is solved, it will actually make their lives easier. In some way or another, it'll help them to achieve targets. It'll help customers to not complain all the time. It'll help management to be happier with their production. It'll help them feel like they are doing value-adding work. It might remove frustrations in their workplace, tools and things that they're struggling with. So that's what we've got to try and find, is we've got to start with the things that matter to people. And sometimes what I've done is to create a project in an environment that's very close to home. And even if it doesn't bring in big changes to meeting customer demand, but what it starts to do is to solve problems that employees have that relate to their own work. That normally helps to get the buy-in. And that's normally one project, right? That's one project that we do, that we say to people, just work with us. And then you don't suffer with having to create examples all the time and convince people, because they feel it and they sense it, and they've been with you in this process. The second thing is to actually not just build slides and do the tools, but to properly actually engage everyone. So your job is to facilitate the improvement, but the people that are actually coming up with all their own understanding of what's going on and providing the inputs and developing the solutions, they're the people working the process. So that's a matter of ownership there. And so with the best of intentions, very often we run a project and we all under pressure, but people get the sense it's somebody else's project that they're doing to us in our environment, and then they don't own it, And so I'm just giving some examples of what typically happens that causes people to feel isolated. They weren't part of it. They didn't control the outcome, and so we walk away with a nice slide deck and great solutions that everybody's agreed to in a meeting, but you get this kind of passive resistance because it's then not working. So those are some of the things. But I can certainly say that those are not unique problems. In all the organizations we work with, there is a measure of that. And I think you're right, Brian. It's a combination very often, if not either one of them, of fear, embarrassment, and just that it's not important. And that's the hardest thing. You're a team of people that's really passionate about this. You get it. You share. But if the message is not coming from the right place in the organization that says we're on this journey, and as an organization we are all committed to improvement, and we want to invite you, welcome areas of or opportunities for improvement, and as leaders, we will support that in these particular ways, and put the right structures in place and the right tools in place for people to fix these problems. Then we have the problem that you're having at the moment, and that's why, when we spoke about the Toyota way as well, we said in an ideal organization, everyone's on board and everybody understands their role. And it's a tough journey, because you're a pioneer, and pioneers always, it's a tough world. You're managing from where you're at. The one thing I can say to you is it might be useful to treat all those parts for what they are, and try and speak to the staff and understand, what their concerns are and why they're struggling. But it's in developing those trust relationships that you'll find those actual answers. And you're not going to find that people embrace these things without that level of trust. There's so many dimensions to it, but people have got to trust the process, and they've got to trust that you have their best interests at heart, and that when they find a solution, that the organization is going to support that solution as well. So definitely a bigger conversation, Brian. Not something we can solve, I think immediately over here.
With regards to culture, it's very close to my heart. As lean practitioners, we are faced with, what you just mentioned, the passive resistance, and we face that every day. So, which reminds me of a saying that you can take the horse to the river, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
So, as lean practitioners, there's this hidden skill that we need to possess of how do you then, get the people, to understand and make sure that they embrace lean, they practice this and see the value in it, of which then you then answered me by saying, if you really want people to be on your side, and embrace Lean, get to understand their processes, what are their problems, solve their problems with them so that they see the benefits. And also there is going to be a spin-off from that. For an example, in sessions that we hold in our ports, if we do a very good project in a certain department, surely it's going to get airwaves, and then other departments which have appetites, but they do not want to go, or rather they don't want to drink in the water, they will also feel, that I want to also be like that department. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on that we still have a long way to go with regards to culture, but it is also, upon us as practitioners to say, how can we, make the organization feel the hunger for Lean, and that we, get the organization to a better place in terms of productivity, efficiency, and cost reductions. So thank you so much for the session, Maurice.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the comment. I always say that in the past world, before I got involved with Lean, we kind of saw change management on big projects as this is the way it was done in the re-engineering days. People would go and do projects. They would have small project teams work in dark rooms and come up with things, and then you'd go out and say, well, we need to now sensitize everyone, and they go on a massive sensitization drive and get people's fears and concerns and so on. And it was almost like we then had to go into this convincing space. And I always like to say that Lean is the change management strategy with Lean, the best one is involvement. Just involve people, involve the right people from the start as you go through, and you don't need special skills to get them on board because they're involved, in the process. And as intimidating as what that might feel, that's what really builds the trust relationship. But yeah, there certainly are things we can do better. I think, we got to go and have a look at our change strategy. Are we using the wins that we're getting from the projects where we're making a difference? Are we using that and sharing that, well enough? How are we giving the rest of the organization this information that, we're growing and this thing is moving and it's making an impact? Just to make sure that it's not just isolated pockets that we're working in, but the whole organization is aware that we're on this drive. So yeah, thank you for the comment. It's and as long as we're aware that there's a gap, there will be a hunger to keep going back and learning and asking, how can we do this differently? So I'm enjoying the questions because it's saying we're doing things, but we're not getting it right. There are better ways to do it. And that's what makes Lean organizations successful. If you go and read up about Toyota, how many mistakes they made, it's incredible. But they were relentless in learning. And that's where they are, because that's why they are where they are today. Not because they always got it right. They made many mistakes, but they were relentless at learning. They didn't just bash their heads all the time and keep trying to force things in.
Yeah. Thank you, Mo. And thank you for those great questions that I think cut really straight into the heart of what it means to go on a lean journey. It's exactly not just about some tools or one concept here or there. It is deep. It is deep into the culture of the organization. It is not easy. It is a long journey. There are many steps forward and almost as many steps back, but it's worth it. And it's about carrying on the conversations to keep the momentum and the impetus going. So I think, and I know we've overrun our time, so thank you to those of you who stayed to the end and enjoyed this with us. It's been wonderful to have all of this time with Mo. Mo, we know you're busy and you're preparing for clients and that tomorrow as well. So we really, really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and expertise with our Lean Forum. We will be making the recording available. And please, if anybody has any further questions or is looking for solutions for your organization, please have a chat to us. We don't believe in a one size fits all. We believe in adapting and customizing. And so give us a shout. Maybe there's something we can do to help you on your journey, even if it's just a word or two of advice from folk who've been there before. So have a wonderful evening, everybody. Stay safe. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Thank
everybody.
you.